Why the heck do you care about arrays and objects in JavaScript? If you're first learning JavaScript, arrays and objects are really the first data structures that you get introduced to. And a student at Parsity, the bootcamp that I own, asked an interesting question yesterday as he's going through some of the JavaScript fundamentals. He's like, what's the point really of like arrays and objects? Like, how often do these come up? And I thought that was a really good question because I just take this for granted, working for over a decade writing code, that, oh yeah, arrays and objects are kind of basically the only data structures you really deal with as a JavaScript developer. Is that fair to say? Somebody out there is going to try to call me on that. But think about it. What do we really do as JavaScript / full stack software engineers that use primarily JavaScript? We handle large amounts of data, which are objects inside of arrays. And I'm going to show you a practical example of how most of the data that you see on the web, whether it's Instagram or Twitter or whatever thing you're using for social media to rot your brain, is using large arrays of objects. And we're going to look specifically at Instagram's payload, the data they transmit over the wire, over the network, to your machine that has all the data with your stupid likes and dumb little pictures and junk that you post online. But before we get into that, let's just take a really brief look at arrays and objects. And by the way, if you don't know arrays and objects, you should really join dev30.xyz or literally just look this kind of stuff up. I'm not a huge fan of diving into the most basic of fundamentals online because I feel like you can kind of learn that on your own, and you really should if you want to be a hireable, well-paid software engineer. If you can't be bothered to do it, well, then maybe this is not for you. So I'm going to make an assumption that you know what arrays and objects are. So here we have an array, shoes, and we have objects in them, which are shoes. They have a name and a price. Name, price, name, price, name, price, name, price. And when you look at stuff like this, you might say, okay, I kind of get it. Like, well, so what? Like, what do you do with this? First of all, when you see an array, the first thing you think is, how do I iterate over this array? For loops for let I equal 0. My favorite way to do it, such that I is less than shoes dot length. I plus plus. Let's start at 0 here. Before we get to the cool stuff with Instagram payload and how we're going to construct something way cooler with that, let's take a look at basic array object stuff, just so you know, right? What the hell is this doing? This is a for loop. This is the most common way to iterate, to go through every single item in an array. This is something that you can basically commit to memory. Honestly, I know people say, oh, don't memorize anything. You can look everything up. No, absolutely not. If I ask this in an interview, which I have, and people say, can I look up how to write a for loop? Interview's over. We're done. You didn't get it. Absolutely didn't get it. Come for me if you want. But if you walk into an interview and you don't know how to write a for loop, you're not getting that job. Straight up. So what's going on here? Let's write it out. I like to do this too. For let I equals 0. Why I equals 0? To start. Where do we want to start? Where do we want to end? And increment. Basically, how far do we go? Easy, right? Start, end, how far do we go? That is the recipe for writing a for loop. Why does I start at 0? Because you learned how to count like a human. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, not in JavaScript or any programming languages. They all start at 0. Why do they start at 0? Because of bits, bytes, binary. Look all that stuff up if you want to. Just know this. Arrays start at 0. So if we count this array, this would be 0. This would be 1. I'm not going to do the whole thing. That will be 2, and so on and so forth. So why do we start at 0? Well, because arrays are 0 indexed, meaning they start at 0. What is the index? It is the location of the item. So you say this is at the 0th index, this is at the first index, and this is at the last index. And we'll get to this later. This is an interesting one. Now, as a human, if you count the number of items in here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You have 9 items. But what is the last index if you have 9 items? Will be 9 minus 1, which equals 6. 9 minus 1 equals 8. Mathematical genius at work here. So the last item is always the length of the array, minus 1, right? So that's how you can programmatically or use a pattern to always get the final item in an array. So in this case, we say the start always going to be 0. The end is always going to be, you can put I as less than or equal to shoes.length minus 1, or you could just say, just go up to, but not including. I is less than. So where do we start? We end when I gets up to shoes.length, we're going to stop. We say until I I is less than shoes.length, meaning go up to 0 is less than, 1, 2, is 7 less than, is 8 less than, yeah, is 9 less than, oh, nope, we're stopping. We're stopping at 9 because it's not less than shoes.length. Again, memorize this. Shoes will be replaced with whatever the array's name is, whatever the variable you use to declare the array, this will replace shoes, right? If we call this cats, this would be cats, right? I++ means go up 1. You'll see many variations of doing this, and whatever way you choose to write this, that is the way you choose to write it. You can do I plus equals 1. You can do plus I. And people make these whole videos on like why one way is better or something like than the other one. Listen, it doesn't really matter. You don't need to worry about the performance optimization of iterating through an array with 20 or 30 or even 100 different items in it. You just don't need to care. So what do we do here? We console log shoes at index I. And I is the typical way naming convention. I for index, just a really common way developers have done this. So that's why you always use, no one would write, C, for example. That just would be a really weird thing to see. So developers have basically consolidated on using I for the index. So we'll run this and we'll get shoes I and we get every single shoe. Cool. Now these shoes are objects. Now objects have properties in them or keys. This property, you can call it a property, you can call it a key. Now the property will be the name to describe it, the word to describe it, some sort of string value, like a sentence almost, but like usually a one-word value that'll say, this is the name, this is the price, this is the location, I don't know. And they can have arrays within them too. They can have like another array. It could be like locations, and you could have an array here. You can put all sorts of things in an object, like you can put all sorts of things in an array. In most cases, though, you'll see things that have a similar shape. These all have a similar shape. They have a name and a price, right? And the name Nike. So this is the value. You have a property and you have a value, or a key and a value. Interchangeable key value pairs. Pairs of things that have a key and a value. So we iterate over the array and we say shoes I. What is that? Cool. We get a bunch of shoes. Now let's say we wanted to get the name of these shoes. What would we do then? We'd console log shoes at index I dot. The dot tells us this is an object and we are accessing something on the object. So shoes I gives us the shoe we're looking at. Shoes at index 0, 1, 2, 3, whatever item in this iteration that we are on. Now we want to look at the name and maybe we want to look at the price. I don't know. Maybe we look at shoes. We'll just do the name for now. How about that? We'll run this. And what do you know? We get Nike, we get Red Wings, whatever. And now we do price. And we do that. Now, price is 200, but that's not the way you usually see a price, right? So this is where things get interesting. If this was a website that we owned and we wanted to iterate over this data and show it on the page, how would you show the price in a way that makes sense to a user in the United States or Turkey or Mexico or whatever? Well, you'd have to do some sort of formatting to this. This is what your job as a web developer often entails. You're getting back large amounts of data that's not in a shape or form that's really user-friendly. So it's up to you to take that data and make it in a shape the user expects. This is where things get kind of fun. So if the price is 200, how do we make it US friendly? I don't know. You could do something like, well, we could do something like this. We could do string concatenation where we have, shoes at index I dot price, and we can put, this will be confusing because we're going to put a $sign in front of this $sign. What this is doing, by the way, right here, it's saying, hey, I want you to interpret this as a JavaScript variable. We'll take away that other $sign. You have a backtick, this funny little character here. Then you have $sign, then you have brackets. Now inside the brackets, so inside these brackets is where you're going to put a JavaScript variable. It will interpret that as the value of that variable. So in this case, it'll be 200, 250, 50, 60, 130, 75, 95, 40, or 35. It'll be one of those values each loop that this is in. This will go around and it'll be one of these values during that time. Now we can add something like another $sign. And then we could have like a .00. Now let's run this. Oops. Console log shoes at I, and we'll console.log this as well. Let's see what we get. Look at that, $200, $35, all these cool numbers right here. Pretty cool, huh? Now let's think about this really trivial example. Let's look at some real data. Let's look at something cool here. I just found this by just looking up Instagram data. So if you go on a website, this is the actual data that's being transmitted from the back end over the server. In fact, if you go on a site like, I don't know, let's go to Instagram.com and go to my Instagram. Let's take a look at the network tab in our developer tools. This is where you should be really looking. By the way, if you're on the web, if you want to be a web developer, you need to learn how to use these tools. So I've opened up my developer tools. I'm in the network tab because the network tab tells me what's getting pulled over the network, what's getting across a wire, over the internet essentially, into my machine. Because when you go to this page, there's a lot of stuff like, look, I have a video or something like that, and I click on this. Let's get rid of all the network requests so we can start clearly, and let's click on this video here. And then what do you know? What do I get here? This is interesting. And so what is this? Oh, it's a preview of the data that's coming here. Look at all these comments that I have under here. It's not this tells you everything. This is a big object essentially, which tells you all sorts of stuff about the comments that somebody left. And it says, I like fronting for this reason. Lots of real work. Cool. This is really cool. Actually, I've honestly never really looked in here. And it says sort order popular. So it's sorted by the most popular. We have quick response emojis. This is so cool. So this is the stuff that actually is literally getting transmitted over the wire and then being used to create or construct this page. So cool. I think this is just such a cool thing to do when you look at this stuff and you can kind of start to understand it. And you can even kind of guess what the data might be like. You could type in Instagram. I don't know. You can filter out data in here by simply typing in the filter and thinking like, what do you think? Like if I type in comments, that's really cool. What if I type in images? No. Pictures? I'm just totally guessing here, by the way. But this is so cool. So I really like this a lot. But now let's take back a look at here. Let's just copy this. I'm going to copy all this, and I'm going to put it in CodePen. So now I've formatted that data, and now you see that it looks like something we could possibly use. So what I want to do is go in here and take a look at something that might be interesting to show on the screen. We have captions. We have user information. We have likes. Data on that. This could be kind of cool to show. So just like pick something, but this is a real world application of where you would use JavaScript arrays and objects. So this is a lot of times what your job really entails. So how would you get to the likes data, iterate over it, and maybe show something cool like the profile picture? Let's just do that right now, to be honest. Let's do const profile pictures equals, and I called this IG data, and we'll just start, we'll go IG data dot, and then let's see where the property, the thing we want to access, is located. So IG data dot likes. If we wanted to do if we wanted to use the user information, it'd be dot user. So now we do IG data dot likes, and then where is the array located in likes? It's like a game. It's like a little puzzle to put together. We have likes dot data, and this is the array. This is where we want to start. So before we go any further, let's just console log some stuff, because what sucks is if you go too far and write code and it doesn't like actually work. And I'm doing this in real time, by the way. I didn't like prepare for this or anything. I think it's actually more useful when you can see this done in real time. So look at that. Okay, cool. This looks good. Great, great, great. So we have the array of stuff. Now let's make a little like div here or something like that. This is where we're going to jam this in. And if you don't know how to do any of this stuff, again, join dev30.xyz or literally look up how to do DOM manipulation and figure out how to write stuff that's JavaScript to the actual HTML output on the screen. And that'll teach you a really cool stuff to do. I have a video on that if you want to check it out. But the idea of getting something that's JavaScript data and then putting that data on the screen so a user can look at it and interact with it, that's essentially what you are doing. Let's call this ID pics. Why not? So now what we're going to do is I'm going to first get my pics element and store it in a variable and say document get element by ID. And you can probably get, what is the ID? It's pics. Duh, right? The pics element, this element here, this div, I'm storing in a variable. Why? Because I want to do something with it later. What do I want to do with it? I don't know. Let's see. Let's do we'll do the same thing for let I equals 0. And then think about it. What am I going to write here? This is our profile pictures. This is the array. What do you think I'm going to write here? little pop quiz for you. For let I equals 0 such that profile pictures, if I can spell it, dot length, right? I is less than. Now, the easy part, I plus plus. We go up one each time. We're going to go up one by one by one by one. Memorize it. Who cares? Now let's do const current pic equals profile pictures at index I. Why am I storing this in a variable? Because I just don't want to write profile pictures I a bunch of times. So I just write current pic. So let's just console.log the current pic. And I'm going to console log a lot because I don't like to go very far in my code without seeing that it works. I really think that's a bad idea. So what do we have here? We have username Cameron. We have their profile picture. Let's use that freaking profile picture and do something cool with that. Let's make an image. Make an image element and then append it to the screen. Add it. So yeah, so people can see. Boom. Now we're making something cool, right? Now we're actually making something cool. So how do you make an image element? Const image equals document dot create element. And I've memorized this stuff, by the way. So, you know, I get it if you don't know how to do this immediately. That's totally fine. Like just look up, how do you make an image element? Like, well, you want to make something, right? You want to make some sort of element that you can put on the HTML. So we make the element, the image element, and now we want to image.src equals the current pic dot profile picture. Let's just copy this so we don't have to like memorize it. Image that equals, and now we have to actually add it to the screen. So now what I do, I say pics element. And it's okay if you don't really get this stuff. I'm just trying to show you, like, here's generally what you're probably going to be doing as a developer in some really, really slimmed down version. Like nowadays we use React for this kind of stuff. It used to be you'd use jQuery, or maybe you're still having to do this if you're using a very older site or something like that. There's definitely reasons I could see why you'd need to do direct DOM manipulation. And it's a shame that more people don't know how to do this nowadays, especially, you know, people that are actually in the field working as developers. Some of them can't write this, which is kind of mind-blowing to me, because you should. So you learning this will make things like React, it'll make your life so much better, and you'll be really appreciative of it, because you're like, oh, I remember doing this with this lame vanilla JS, and now look at me, I'm doing it with React or whatever. But before you jump to React, you need to know how to do this kind of stuff. So now we do pics element dot append child, add this to the screen, our image. Will it work? Will it work? Oh, yes. Yes, we got all the profile pictures. Now they're all blank and stupid looking. That's too bad. Whatever. Oh, man, so sad about that. Why is that? Maybe it's because these profile pictures aren't for real. Just thought about that. Let's look at the console here, and let's take a look at this in the browser and just make sure that, you know, we're not doing something weird here. So let's take a look at this in the browser and see why that might be. Okay, well, that's a shame, isn't it? You can't actually get the image, but if we could, this could have been something cool. Now here's a challenge for you. Go out there, find some actual data somewhere. You can go online, just look up, I don't know, sample Twitter data, sample Instagram data, sample Airbnb data. Do what I've done here, and maybe use something else. Instead of username, I mean, instead of like an image, how about we just do username? So we can actually feel good about what we did. Let's change this. Current pic, okay, or current, this will be current user, whatever. And we, instead of an image, let's just create a H1. And we'll do H1. And you see how this is a pattern now? So now we do H1 dot text content equals current user dot what was the thing they have in there? Yeah, current user dot full name. I don't know, whatever, right? Full name. Is that the correct way of writing it? Username full underscore name, full underscore name, and we append it to the screen, and we'll append an H1 instead. But same rules apply. It's like you create an element, you add some content to it, and then you append it to the screen. The world is full of patterns, and so is web development. Very little is new under the sun. Once you understand a few common patterns like this, like how to get data, how to iterate over it, how to make elements, and then have those elements reflect the data, That is essentially what you're doing as a developer. Think how many sites you go on that's really what's going on. In fact, every site, I'd say, is basically using some form of this pattern. Once you understand this pattern, and one important thing we left out is how do you get this data from a source like an API, like a backend source, because the data you're using isn't going to be like hard coded into your web app. It's going to be transmitted over a wire, literally like the wires or all the underground wires that are carrying across information across the world at lightning speed. That is how you're transmitting data. Now, the same rules apply. The only difference is you won't have the data here. You'll be getting it in another way, but then all this really remains the same. So learning this is essential and is going to make your life so much better as a web developer. Hope that's helpful. And if you're interested in joining Parsity, you should. So check it out. We only accept 10 students per quarter, which is pretty wild, actually, because you get to work one-on-one with me, which maybe is a great thing. Maybe it's not. I don't know. See you around.